So as we were sitting here, I realized I probably should have had a little introductory slide to at least introduce myself, but I'll do that really quickly before I go and dive into some CVs. I'm Eva. I'm a second year PhD student in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. Um, I do a lot of research with social behavior and microbial communities and kind of how microbes interact with animals and how that could potentially influence their behaviors. I work with a really cool species of harvester ants. So they build these cool nests underground, and I kind of look at how microbes and the ants are interacting below ground in this really cool nest that they live in. And I do a lot of my research up here in Santa Barbara, so pretty local, which is fun to be able to stay near and still be able to do research at a time like this. So there's some benefits there. So I do a lot of field work. That being said, I have a lot of field work training. I did a master's and I did honeybee research and behavior. Kind of, I looked at how honeybees choose which flowers to land on. And so I've done a lot of like research experience, and then I also have done quite some like field tech experience. So I don't know if you guys have done like some help doing like outside, more like outdoors stuff that isn't maybe it's for an organization rather than for a lab or a specific individual or something like that. But we can talk more about that when we get to the CVs. I just have a few things that I wanted to go over that are kind of general when it comes, I think, to ecology. And I think today I'll talk more about, when you're going to continue on and think about pursuing certain graduate school opportunities, or potentially you want to look at fieldwork opportunities or a lab technician, or maybe you want to go do fieldwork with an NGO or something like that. Or I think these could be, and maybe not necessarily fieldwork, but any sort of academic research associated. I think that all these things will hopefully transfer over and be applicable for you all. I think the first thing that's important to think about is what type of position are you applying to? I know I've said a bunch of them. I'm not entirely sure what everybody's thinking of, but I think you can think of graduate school, whether that's a master's or a PhD, whether that's research based, whether it's more classes based and kind of like project based. There's a lot of different types. Whether you want to be a lab technician, so there's the idea of like doing science inside, and kind of I think sometimes you can get paid for these positions, you stay on, maybe sometimes you also volunteer for them. It kind of just depends. Maybe you get a little bit of an internship, like a kind of a 3-5 month gig or something, not super long term, but something for the meantime. And then the flip side would be like the field version of this is usually what I think of. And I've done all of these things. So this is kind of where my expertise comes in. And then I think it's important to think of what experience do you have that you've accumulated over high school and your undergrad is usually, that's kind of what I would focus on. And it depends. If you have a lot of experience, maybe you'd focus on college, right? If you don't have that much experience, maybe it's okay to, to include some really important and impactful things you did in high school. I think that's totally okay, especially if they're long-term. And so things that you might have experience in undergraduate research, maybe you worked in a lab or helped an undergrad or helped a graduate student or in some way participated in something. Maybe there were summer programs, whether that's research or volunteer internships, right? Anything. Maybe it's also during the year as well, while you're in school. That's even more impressive and something to put on there and highlight. Then you have, workshops that you do. I don't know if you guys do any workshops here on UCLA through any departments, trainings, certifications. I know people do Excel, or I don't know exactly what, or maybe there's like a Python, if you do any sort of coding, or if you I'm not sure if there's any sort of CPR certification or outdoor. I think that UCLA offers some sort of safety outdoor thing, like things like these, these are total experiences and qualifications that you need to think about. So go beyond just, specifically what's transferable to your career, and think like additional things that are also career development. So like outreach and engagement, like those are still important things that people want to see to make sure that you're a holistic person, in my opinion. So make a list of all of these. Just don't even think about organizing. I think the first thing is just list it all down. And then I think the next part is where, honestly, I think it totally depends on who you are visually, what you like aesthetically. There's a million different ways you can organize a CV. I wish it was just one cut and dry, but it's not. So you kind of have to choose and play around with it. Mine have changed over the years to some extent, and I think that's probably a little bit natural. But the first step is write your list, and then you can start seeing what things group together. And I'll go over some of these main groups. So these are, I'm just going to throw these up. I'm going to go into them more in detail a little bit after I run through some things. But this is kind of a format that I think is pretty consistent across academia, research, NGO, nonprofit, conservation, kind of like those things. The order, the content, that might kind of change, but visually, this is probably what you will be seeing. Oh, so I think that there's three things that you should really think about: style, format, and length. And I'm going to go over them really quickly. Oops. So the first thing is that, as you saw in that previous slide, there's a lot of headings and subheadings. You have your name, you have your, there's a lot. So you need to think about that and try to also make it visually appealing. You don't want to overwhelm someone with too many subheadings. Be strategic there. Provide some brief personal details. I don't know if you noticed, but the very top was our name, what department we're in, our email, I think like our work address or something like that, like little things like that, some identifiers, some personal details. And then these are some of your first few sections you would find on a CV. So your education, if you've been involved in any publications, or maybe what's more applicable to you all would be your research experience, or, workshop, experience outside of school in whatever field you have done. I don't, and that's a good question. Sorry. Would you recommend using a template for headings, etc., or is that seen as too cookie cutter? So because formatting, I think that formatting these things is so annoying. And I will provide you with my template that like the Word document that I use that actually has like the divisions of everything. But I think that it's really hard to edit the formatting of those templates. And so, years could get kind of gnawed in a row. And I think do the extra step of doing it manually. I mean, I don't know, Rich, maybe you think something else, but I find it that it's so much easier to edit. And if you're adding things to it and you want to move sections, right, and you're editing this thing and saving it when you apply to new things, right, because each one might be slightly different, it's just a little bit easier to handle something that you've created versus like a template that you might mess up. I haven't done it with a template. That being said, I do think, you'll see that mine is very cookie cutter though as well. Like it's still a very systematic way of organizing things. So I don't know if it would necessarily be seen as too cookie cutter. I don't know if that's the reason I would use. I would just use it like I have more control over something that I created than a template. So that's why I would use that. Good question. And then there's other sections that to include that could be depending on what you have experience with, but fundings, grant, awards, technical skills, like maybe you learned some PCR or something like that, or you know how to sample something outside, or like you've learned some sort of technique, outreach and engagement, professional memberships, like I belong to Animal Behavior Society, maybe you went to a conference as an undergrad, Slackness, I don't know, something like that. Honestly, I put my languages. If you're speak multiple languages, I think that that's a beneficial, and you should put that on there. Work experience, like especially, oops, I don't know what it's, work experience, especially if it's related, like you got paid to do something that you like eventually want to do later in life. So I was a field technician and I got paid to do that for a little bit. It's not just the things that like I volunteered for. And especially if it was multiple years, I think the more things that have gone for longer, the better. That looks good. Not to say that having many things isn't good either, that are shorter. And then any seminars you've presented at or something like that. I think I saw, oops, something here. I've also been told, I haven't heard that about AI in academia, but I do know that NSF, which is the National Science Foundation, which is where like ecologists and a lot of our field gets funding, is basically like championing research projects that use AI. So maybe that will become a thing one of these days. But as of now, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think so. But anyways, so then you think of your format, right? And so you want classic 11 point, right? You don't want it to be too busy. Don't make someone angry with something so simple that you can change, like your font and your form and size and stuff like that. I think bullet points are a really good way to highlight important items and present your credentials concisely. But you'll also see an example that I have of someone who wrote one sentence under each thing really nicely too. So I think that there's multiple ways. Be consistent with headings, subheadings, numbers, and dates. I'll go over that here in a second too. And make smart but sparing use of bold and italics. For this, I actually went back through my CV and realized I used bolding way too much and I hated it. And I went back and changed it. So, you know, over time you'll change it, and that's just a natural part. I think I have like 20 versions of a CV. Length, 2 pages is optimal usually when you're applying to something, but it depends, and it can be more. I would just read whatever qualifications there are, whatever like the application stuff says, requirements. Make sure you include all research specific details that emphasize your suitability for that particular job, right? And so I would also say, in addition to having ones that like you give to specific jobs, keep one that's just a tally of everything that just gets longer and longer and longer. Because as you get more experience, you're eventually going to be able to pick and choose what you want to put on there for particular positions. So always keep this long one. And I try to update it like 4 times a year. Or when I'm excited and something awesome happens, then I'll put it on there too. And then I'll keep on thinking of things. Cool. So that's all I have here. I'm going to keep sharing my screen, but not that. I'm just going to share the entire desktop. Okay. So I wanted to show you some CVs here. How much time do I have? Okay, perfect. This one is mine. So we can first go through mine. This is what I said, right? Kind of at the beginning, you have your information. Also, now that I'm looking at this, I feel like my name is way too big. So make it smaller. But also, you do want it to stick out. I usually always have my name and a number, like with the page number on throughout the pages. So if they're on the page, they still remember my name. Maybe it's just psychological, but it's my way to like have them remember my name. I have, you know, my lab number, or where I'm at work, your email address. Maybe for you all, it's your email address and a phone number or something if you're not kind of located at a position, or maybe it's UCLA, whatever. I have all my education here. For you, it would be your undergrad. I had at one point my minors under here, so you could list your minors there as well. I think that's totally okay. I had a distinction, so if you do honors or anything, put that in there as well. Or if I think you can put like if you graduated with like cum laude, summa cum. I think you can even add that, especially now as you guys are leaving undergrad. My first one is publications, but as you'll see, my friend Her first one is research experience. So I think this would actually be a little bit more pertinent to how you all would write yours, because I would imagine that you would have more like intern, outreach, work, volunteer experience rather than like publications, for example. But really, the first thing that you're going to list on here is ideally like the most impressive. I definitely am a proponent of the most impressive and the most important goes at the very beginning, especially if they're just glancing through a lot of these. The first page, I think, is probably a big impact. So whether that's your research, whether that's outreach, whether that's work you did, whatever that is, whatever category, put that first, whatever you're most proud of and you think relates more specifically to the job that you are writing this for. Okay. If you do have a publication that you got an undergrad, let's say it's not published yet. I think as an undergrad, that's okay. I even honestly still do this. I have 2 right now. Well, one just got rejected, but I have one that's in prep, which means that I basically I have a manuscript. You need it. You can only write that if someone emailed you and said, "Can I please have a manuscript?" and you sent them one. So it's really close to being there, or it's on its way. Like you wouldn't be utterly embarrassed, right? If you sent it to someone, you can put that in prep and you can have the author's name. You've already obviously then thought of the authors and a title. I think that's okay. If it's in review, if you sent it off, you put in review. I have one in press. It hasn't come out yet, but it's accepted, right? And then if you do have them, you put the years. So I would also say highlight, use bold sparingly. A great place to put bold is to highlight your name, especially if it's in the first part or if it's in the middle. So I think that's a good example of when to bold. Is your name in publications or potentially maybe like a presentation that you gave, whether it was poster or if it was an outreach presentation that you gave to like an organization or something like that. Totally okay. Another good thing to highlight is if you had any money or anything like that given to you, whether that's like an educational grant that maybe or scholarship you all got coming into school that was merit-based or something like that. I think at this point in time, that's probably okay to put on there. I have, professional presentations, and then I also, and this is again where I highlight my name. Notice, I think one important thing to note is that I have all my years on my left, and that's just something that I've chosen to do. I have all my years on my left, all my numbers on my left. I've numbered my publications, and I have any numbers or anything on the right. But basically, it's kind of like the left. You would read left to right normally. My friend, she has everything on the right. So it's done in 2 ways, it's not just one way or another. As you'll see, it really is, what you prefer, what you find visually more appealing. She also specifies things a little bit more than I do. She has DOIs, which is probably a good idea for papers. But you'll just see that, some people organize things from left to right, right to left, kind of depends. This is what I was going to say. She has a sentence under each of her research experiences. Whereas if you look at mine, it's not this one, sorry. I had bullet points. And I think both are fine, in the end, hers took less space than mine. So if you like very concise, then maybe, you just you include fewer bullet points or you go her route, where it was more of a kind of a list potentially of things that she did, 2 sentences or something like that. But there's some variety in what you guys choose to do. I think maybe, I think it also depends on how many, skills you've gained in each of your experiences. If you have a lot of skills that you maybe don't want to bullet point that because that could be a really long thing. Maybe that's when you kind of try to make it succinct into more of a sentence or 2. But that just goes to say there's a bunch of options you can do. I put professional development. So I do a lot of workshops. I don't know if you've ever done, you know, I did like a, you can do professional development workshops. You can do career workshops. I don't know if you're coming to this, if you've done anything like this a little bit more formal. I think those are things you can put on here. I don't know if you are aware of the QC Bio. They do like a R or like any coding or things like that. Like if you do any, maybe it's not even that extent. It's like Excel or it's some other, it's Adobe. I don't know what what you all are versed in, but any sort of thing like that, I think you can totally put on here. It highlights that you have some experiences outside of maybe just like research or science. You also have some other qualities and you want to gain other skills as well. Also, if you don't know them and you need to learn about like how to analyze something, QC Bio is lovely, and they also record everything and post it online on YouTube. So you have every like workshop basically there for you if you can't make them. And I believe you can get credit. Community engagement. So I do work with a lot of clubs. If you're a part of clubs, put that on there. If you have leadership positions, even better. I just I've gotten some qualifications over the years, but I feel like this is honestly even a place where you could have bullet points if you have a leadership position and you've gained a lot of stuff and you've worked through it. You've been in a group for a few years as an undergrad, so you've done so much. I think this is another place where you could potentially expand it if necessary, and if you feel like you have gained skills. And then of course I said like languages, researchers travel, we could do collaboration. People who are in conservation, they travel, there's collaboration. I think that highlighting, your ability to move throughout our global world is great. I guess that's kind of my 2 cents for you all. I'm happy to send these to Michael, and I'll send Word versions. So if you like either of these styles, you can take them and just like delete our information and put your information in as like a template to whoever said something. And I think it's just important to remember that they change over time. I opened my first one ever, and it was right after undergrad, and I was applying for a job. And mine has come so much that I actually recently just took away the research experience part because I didn't need it anymore. But it's like a fluid process. And I would say that it changes. If there's anything that you take away, it probably changes per position that you're applying for. And maybe it doesn't change like what you put on and what you leave off because you don't have that much yet, but it changes how you order it. So the things that are most applicable to that job need to go up first so they see them, I would say. Like that's the number one thing to take away. And then also to make it pretty, because I know it can be annoying, but I think aesthetics do matter when it comes to a CV if they're reading so many of them, and a lot of them are very similar. That one little thing might actually kind of matter, or it might make you stick out a tiny bit in a good way, or if it's horribly formatted, then in a bad way. Awesome. Well, Richard, I can hand off the microphone to you.
Cool. I learned a lot in your workshop. That was really cool to see. I probably might ask you for your CV too. Cool. So let me share my screen. Let's see if I want to share everything. Okay, cool. So let's start. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. Today, I'm going to present on jobs, academia, and the mishmash of various agencies and nonprofits. My name is Richard Rockman. I'm a graduate student, plant ecologist, and biodiversity coordinator for the CSUN Institute for Sustainability. That's Cal State Northridge, if I say CSUN. So what I'm going to go over today is time and money, your basic CV, right? your 3 references, the job search itself, and my strategy for nonprofit and federal jobs of apply, modify, and then reapply. Okay, so first of all, time and money, right? Hierarchy of needs, you need to take care of yourself. For what was the last statistic I saw? Like more than 40% of CSU and UC students are food insecure and have undergone like homelessness, with like at least 10% have undergone homelessness once within a month period. That number is probably way bigger now because of COVID-19. So take care of yourself when you're looking for jobs, looking for grad school. Medi-Cal, CalFresh. CalFresh is for like EBT for food stamps, low-income housing. Just to show how much I believe in this, this is my webpage. This is my portal to the Department of Social Services. So do not be afraid to ask for these. It's not a handout, it's survival. And especially with our income level, that's really important. Okay, so I want you to ask yourself, what did you do yesterday, right? Like I heard this once and it's kind of changed my life ever since. How did you spend your time yesterday, right? Like the pandemic's messed everything up, right? Granted, like I live in anxiety every single day, but yesterday I probably went on a walk and played Pokemon Go and did iNaturalist, and I sent a bunch of emails about plants. Like that's kind of like who I am as a person, like low key, like social media, like Pokemon, that sort of stuff, right? And I kind of don't mind that. I'm a little unproductive these days because of the pandemic, but I'm a strong believer that what you do on a daily basis, it has a cumulative effect, right? So if you're looking to advance your career, consider, are you utilizing your days to represent who you want to be into the future, right? Are you giving gifts to your future self? Okay, so in that regard, your CV should be a representation, right, of who you are as a person, your convictions, right? And treating yourself nicely. You matter, right? Your experiences matter, but also your labor matters. So do not be taken advantage of, right? So when I have undergrads volunteer for me, I'm giving them something back. I'm going to do something for them. If I can't get them funding, I'm going to do something. So you should guard your time and your effort. Don't let people take advantage of you, and be conservative with um, how you spend your time, and let it represent what you believe in. So backtracking a little bit, volunteering and internships, right? Like I strongly believe if you work, you should make money from it. But if you're kind of like starting from the beginning, right? Volunteering internships are ways to get those experiences. So talk to grad students, right? Talk to us. We want to help you. We want to tell you what we did, right? I'm gonna make my email available to you all so you can ask me what I did, right? Talk to grad students you know in your life. Think local, right? I could think of 10 agencies within Los Angeles County and regional parks and national parks and park space where I could do research or volunteer or plant trees or pick up trash or something. So think local, and then maybe leave home. And this comes with a caveat, but don't be afraid to go look for an opportunity if they can provide food and housing, right? Kind of expand what you're comfortable with, but be safe at the same time. And the caveat is the carbon footprint and parachute research. So I think all too common in academia is that we've developed the savior complex where we could just like parachute into the tropics, do all the research, not give the indigenous people that live in that area credit for what you benefited from. You benefited from that experience, and the people that lived there did not, right? So I think this cry to abandon the ecological history of parachute research is really good. Like we should avoid that. Like there's tons of opportunities in Los Angeles, and if you're interested in social justice and environmental justice, like you're in the city. Like we're facing a lot of catastrophes right now that need intellectual attention. So that's what I'll say about that. So let's go into your basic CV. Okay. So this document is living and breathing, right? It's gonna constantly be changing. You can have your huge master copy. I think I'm gonna show you my master copy. It's 8 pages, right? Like you might get called upon to ask for more specific things. So that could change, or you could save a new version of your CV and keep your master copy. So just be willing to accept that change. My opinion slightly differs in this, but this is kind of more my personality. So excuse me if you disagree. The content and interview to me are what really stand out. What's not as important to me is font, color, and structure. I like that. I like the level of importance in your sections, and I definitely agree in chronology, right? Really similar, but just be consistent. Whatever you choose to do, be consistent in that approach and make it well organized. Don't let grammar and spelling become blatant errors that make you not get that call back. Okay, let's show you my CV. Okay, can everyone see this? Cool. Okay, so I have my introductory information, my phone number, my email. I have my university address. Here's where I list my graduate education. So I'm currently at Cal State Northridge, studying disturbance in long-lived organisms, examination of climate change, yada yada, wildfires and stuff like that. Okay, cool. I list my undergrad education and my major and minor, and like kind of the main project I was working on. We're ongoing in the data analysis and publication, so I'm not even gonna create a publication. I have a few things that are going to end up becoming publications, but I'm not quite there yet. So stay tuned for that section. But I put my funding as one of my first categories from my graduate school and my undergrad. And I put crowdsourcing. I'm a firm believer in crowdsourcing for science. That not only is there websites like experiment, I think it's experiment.org, I could be wrong, but that'll fund specific projects. But you shouldn't be afraid to ask for money to do really cool things that advance science or advance your career, right? So be that, in my opinion, that should go in your funding section. So under my experience, research I list as first. My current job is the biodiversity coordinator. I go for the opposite approach. I don't go minimal. I go all out. I describe every single task that I do. I want all those verbs in there. I want all those nouns in there. And I'm going to explain why, but I want numbers in there. Numbers are money for me. If I can talk about how many students I lectured, or, I just remembered I forgot a section on my most recent teaching job. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I like as much information in there as possible. So it's bulky, and that's not how everyone does it, but I'll explain why in a bit. So then I list my advisors as well. I list my role as well. Like this is my current thesis project with monitoring oak trees using GIS and remote sensing. And then, it's a collaboration between the university and the National Park Service. It's still an ongoing project, so it's not very bulky, but I'm going to bulkify it once I work more on it. And then I have the UCLA Fire Project I'm working on with John Keeley, Brad Schaefer, and Joey Curdy at UCLA, where again, I'm listing numbers and I'm talking about like what we're doing. This is another one of those things that's not even anywhere close to the publication stage, so I'm not putting it there, but that's probably gonna end up being a paper too. I put my field technician positions with nonprofits, profits, for-profits, and government agencies. My field tech position with NatureServe, I'm listing how many miles I drove. I'm listing, how many miles I hiked per day, how long I was staying, various pieces of technology we utilized. So here's my national park job. I did it for 2 years, so it's a little more bulky, right? I talk about different restoration projects that I worked on, each tool of the restoration trade that we used, maybe some statistical analysis we did in various restoration projects, and then any organizations that I worked with as well. Here's my tech position with USGS, kind of the same thing. I don't study wildlife. I'm a plant biologist, but I have studied wildlife before, so I didn't have much to say. I usually go a little skimpy on the wildlife stuff because most of the jobs I'm applying for, I'm not really interested in that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that'll come into play later. Undergrad research, my field, I did a field week that was also a research project. So it's kind of a seminar, kind of a research project. That did end up getting published, but we were only in the acknowledgement. So I didn't think to create like an entire section for it, but yeah. And then I worked for a grad student for a year studying wood rats. So I didn't get an income, but that was a lot of really cool research experience. I also have my GA and my teaching assistant positions here at Cal State Northridge, and this section is expanded. I didn't include the 2020, but yeah, I teach cell biology as a, like, it's not a lab, it's kind of like a lab. But so I include that kind of stuff in there, and I'm very specific. I was a student assistant for a paraplegic professor, so I include kind of those things in there, but I make sure not to talk about their medical condition, right? I don't think that's totally appropriate, but that I was a student assistant for them, I think is really valuable. I have a media section where anytime I'm in a newspaper or I'm on a blog or I'm on being interviewed for a podcast, I put it in here. And I'm going to talk about my queerness in a second because I do, well, probably right now. I think it's really important that we, if you can do so safely, right, given your home environment, be out and proud about not only who you are, but accept that those sorts of things make you a better researcher. They make you a better colleague. They make you better at what you do, whether you're queer or from a disenfranchised community. I think it's totally appropriate to not only talk about those professional memberships, but to talk about that intersectionality too, of when you're speaking to the media about queer scientists or, you know, like, so I started a queer organization at Cal State Northridge. I'm in the National Organization of Gay and Lesbian Scientists and Technical Professionals. I wear that proudly, and I will always discuss it in an interview because I believe that makes me better than my competitors. So that's what I have to say about that. Professional memberships, you pay for them, you get in them. It's really cool. And usually it's like they'll give you a discount if you're poor. Or like they'll slide your fee if you like send them an email and tell them your situation. Like there's a bunch of ways you can get around stuff. But they help because if you want grants, like typically you have to be a member in order to have a higher chance of getting the grant. So a lot of these are for because I applied for grants. I might not have gotten them, but now I have access to a bunch of resources because I'm a part of these professional organizations. Here I have my volunteering. I like this section a lot, so I upkeep it. You know, just various like fun restoration projects that I wasn't a part of, but I kind of help with, or I'm involved in some of the political stuff with the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Preserve and the steering committee. So that's kind of like public outreach stuff. Some certifications that are way outdated, I should probably delete, but like UTV, ATV training is pretty cool. And then I have my references. And then we are gonna talk about references because that's my next section. Okay, cool. Your references. These are my references. That is Dr. Nat Zappia, Dr. Polly Schiffman, my advisor, and Dr. Patrick McIntyre with NatureServe. Ask them. Do not put people on your CV if you have not talked to them. They should know that they're on your CV. And also, do you really know them? Like, is this just a grad student you were in a single class with and they barely know you because you didn't speak up in the class? If you're gonna do that, talk a lot in class, email them a lot, go to their office hours, like make sure that grad student knows who you are. This is Mars Walters at UCLA, who's like one of my best friends. Yeah,
Oh my
Anyhow,
gosh, you know Mars.
oh,
We were in the same cohort.
I am a huge Mars fan. Anyhow, Mars gave me permission to put Mars in this presentation. So anyhow, okay. So if you're going to email them to ask to be put on your CV, give them 2 to 3 days, and then it's okay to email them again, right? Like I get on average 10 emails a day. On a bad day, I might get 50 emails. On a really good day, I might get like 2 or 3, right? Make sure if you don't get a response, it's okay to follow up. If they don't reply after 2 emails, you might want to move on. But it's okay to reply to the same email 2 to 3 days later. Give them a month's notice for letters of recommendation. Okay. That sounds like a long time. That's it. Do not ask for a letter of recommendation next week. Don't ask for a few days later. That's rude. Even for someone you know, and if it is someone you know and someone that's done it before, give them at least 2 weeks. That's nice. Because they probably have it saved on their computer. They just got to edit some things. Like maybe their opinion of you has changed now. I'm kidding. To only ask people to write letters of recommendation if you think they'll give a good letter of recommendation. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about searching for a job. Okay, this is the greatest website on planet Earth that I use all the time. This is the Texas A&M Job Board. I use this for internships. I use this looking for grad schools. I use this looking for part-time jobs just to get me through the summer. I use this all the time, right? And so let's say you type in restoration. Amazing, just a bunch of opportunities come up. Field crew. You might want to focus on things that are entry level, right? Either entry level or maybe internship, but it's better to do paid stuff. But even if you want to do grad school, you can look up labs around the country. And a lot of stuff's remote right now, so you might get away with staying where you're at and going to grad school too. So yeah, so here's an MS and PhD position, which is great. I love this website so much. The federal government posts on here, state governments post on here, nonprofits post on here, professors post on here. I don't know why. I don't know how Texas A&M got so lucky that everyone uses them, but everyone uses them. Okay, cool. So here's some other, here's USA Jobs. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, but it'll start at Texas A&M University, their jobs board, and then eventually you'll have to do the federal application on USA Jobs. Cal Careers, that's going to be the state government, the California state government jobs website. I'm not going to talk about this as much, but be aware that these are really good jobs. They have a lot of security. What you do have to be aware of, that there's going to be, you might have to take tests and certifications just to apply for the job. So whether that's herbicide treatment, whether that's some sort of safety with some sort of mechanical tool, whether that's being sufficient in some statistical program, be aware that that might happen. That could happen with a federal job as well, but more likely California is pretty strict on that kind of stuff. Some others that I talk to folks about, the Conservation Job Board's pretty good. I don't use it, but some of my colleagues do. And then just go on the nonprofit's website, your favorite nonprofit, right? So I've listed the, what is it? Regional Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains. So their career page usually has jobs listed on it. Right now, they're looking for 2 positions right now. They're not entry level. You need 10 years of experience to get them. But you could go on your favorite, Sierra Club. Go on Sierra Club, look at careers, look at their website, and see what they have, right? If those are if that's what you're really believing, if you're a big fan of studying green lighting, right? The practice of white folk creating red-lined environmental racism, those sorts of things. There's an organization called Green Lining in San Francisco. You really are passionate about that sort of environmental justice, You go on their website, you look under careers, or you just email them, you cold email them and you ask them, right? You send them a copy of your CV with a cover letter and you talk about some of your interests, right? Or maybe cold emailing people asking for a job is a little scary for you. You could just email them and ask if you can interview or just talk with someone that works there that you have a few questions, right? A lot of people are, you'd be surprised. Someone might say, yeah, sure, I'll talk with you. And then you can ask them like about available positions or whatever. But don't be afraid to cold email people. I do it all the time. Okay. Oh, I got cut off. Oh, darn it. Okay. This is my strategy of apply, modify, and reapply. It got cut off because it changed, whatever. Okay, cool. So this is for nonprofits. You're gonna go on that website or go on Texas A&M. It's gonna say the job. You look at the description. You copy that description onto a Word document. Okay, this is very important. You're gonna follow the instructions of how they want your CV and cover letter to be presented. Then what you're going to do is you're going to create a copy of your CV that includes the language from that job description, right? Like if they're saying they want bird banding and you've done bird banding, but you didn't call it that, you better go back to your CV and call it that. And okay, that comes with a caveat too. But and you want to take away things that don't matter. If it's a GIS job, they're not really going to care about your CPR certification. I mean, you're working at home. Like, what? Why do they don't? So you might to save space, you might take that away. But they're definitely going to care what GIS programs you're familiar with. So you're going to want to include QGIS and RStudio and all that kind of stuff, and ArcMap and whatever, AirDOS. Okay, cool. Do not lie. Under any circumstance, should you say you're familiar with something and not be. Like I had a friend put ArcMap, and I swear he used it like 2 times, and both times I watched him do it, and he was terrible. But he had that in his resume. And I'm like, dude, you are gonna get yourself in so much trouble if you say you're familiar with a computer program and you really have no idea how to use it. So don't do that. That's really bad. Like be honest of what you can and can't do. Okay, cool. When you apply and you're going to send in that modified resume, you want to send it as a PDF, right? And so you also want to include a cover letter into that PDF package. And I like 3-paragraph format. So your first paragraph is like you understand and you want the job, right? And you reiterate the position. The second paragraph is like why you're the most qualified for that. Just kind of a brief like elevator speech of why you think you're the best. And then 3, this is debatable, but I like to put my accommodations in there. Like I have a vehicle, I have health insurance, I don't need transportation, I don't need housing. You might have to modify that. And some people, they want to know about like allergies and there's just certain things that might go in this portion depending on the job you're applying for. So the 3rd paragraph has a little more wiggle room. Okay. If it's federal, everything's different. You're going to download your CV onto USA Jobs to get the process started, right? And so you're going to make a profile on USA Jobs. You're going to start a Word document with the same thing you did for a nonprofit job or, whatever, a for-profit. You're going to start a Word document and include those descriptions in there, but also quiz questions. So a lot of federal jobs, they'll give you a quiz. They'll ask you 1 out of 4, how comfortable are you doing point line intersect for vegetation heights? If you don't put 4, you're probably not going to get the job. But don't lie. Don't say you're good at something and not be good at it. But you're going to put those sorts of questions onto that Word document because you're not going to submit the quiz questions. You're not going to submit the application the first time you do it. You're going to close after you extract all the information from that application. You're going to cancel your application before you turn it in. And you're going to rewrite your CV and your cover letter to include that kind of language from those descriptions and the quiz questions. Okay, but like why? Why am I reapplying, right? The first reason is robots. So when, it's always robots. So when your application goes through their system, the algorithm's gonna pick up on certain keywords. That's why my CV is so bulky, is because I want that algorithm to pick up whatever language I'm putting in there, right? And so if your CV doesn't meet a certain threshold for what the job is, it gets thrown in the no pile. Federal jobs are super competitive. Cal State jobs are super, like California state government jobs are super competitive. Like the instant a job becomes available on USA Jobs, like there is thousands and thousands of people that are applying for them. A lot of federal jobs aren't even, it's so difficult to get hired through the federal government and so easy for government agencies to hire through nonprofits. That's typically what they do. And that's, in my experience, that's mostly what I've handled. Um, it's so much paperwork, especially in the age of the Trump administration, to hire people through the federal government. What they'll do is they'll pay a nonprofit a certain amount of money, and then the nonprofit will hire you. And then you're working for the government, but it was easier through the nonprofit. But let's say you can't, USA Jobs does open, and you can work for a federal position. You're competing with a ton of people. Those are cushy jobs. They don't change over very often, so you're pretty stable, and there's a lot of benefits. So once your CV makes it through the robots, then it goes to HR. So non-biologists are the second tier of who's going to look at your application from USA Jobs. And they're going to make the call of whether there's any red flags or not, and then they'll send it over to the biologist. And they're the ones that will actually understand your CV, right? Like HR barely understands what, what various herbicides you have experience are and why they matter, right? But the biologist does. So in order for your resume to make it to the most important person, you got to bypass those robots. And the way you do that is by making sure those descriptions are in your CV. Because if those keywords aren't in there, you're going to get passed over. Okay, so I totally want y'all to email me if you have questions or schedule a meeting for Zoom. I'm also on iNaturalist. I'm on it all the time. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as well. Please contact me if you wish. And here is a lovely flower. Oh my gosh, what is it even called now? It's not Mimulus, it's probably Diplodocus biglovii, I think. I'm just guessing. Watch me find out. It's Erythranthi. But I think it's Diplodocus. Anyhow, okay. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you all both for your amazing presentations. I'm going to start with some of the questions that were sent to us beforehand. So there were a lot of questions asking about the differences between resumes and CVs and when to use one or the other. Would any of you, either of you, want to take that question?
I haven't seen a resume in a really long time. I have not worked in NGO government, whether that's state, local, or federal, however, though. So I don't know what it's like there. I know in the world of like academia, I think it's CVs, and that's pretty much what you're going to see now moving forward if you kind of stay in that realm. It sounds, yeah, I don't know. You can say, Richard, what it is on the other end of things, but yeah, in academia, like CVs is all you hear about. And yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. Resumes were when I was applying to like a coffee place when I was younger in like high school. Like I don't even know how to explain a resume to you all. I like only know how to explain the CV to you, if that makes sense. I feel like they might be a little obsolete, but sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, no. You got it perfectly right. Like I explained my CV to my partner who's in the film industry, and he's just shocked at the length of it. Like even 2 pages is bizarre to him. For a resume, it's typically like 1 page and it's one-sided, right? To me, that's absurd. Like CVs are like these living, breathing documents, and they change, right? And certain labs might want certain things, but even within NGOs and government agencies, like they're all scientists. Like you're working for scientists, unless you decide to go to environmentalism, which in social justice, which can be a little different. they might want resumes, but even then, a lot of them are academics. Like, so typically you're gonna find in these kind of more intellectual fields, even restoration ecology where it's really applied, you're gonna find CVs. And I think if you stick to that, even though our CV style is different, like with mine being like really bulky, um, I would still call that a CV versus like a resume, which like when I look at a resume, it's just unrecognizable to what a CV looks like. That's just my personal take, I guess.
Cool.
I
Thank you
think,
both. Oh,
sorry, I'm not like a professional in any field, but like I've learned like scarily recently that federal resumes are a thing. And when you're applying for a federal position, say like you submit an application to USA Jobs, they want to see a federal resume. And I'm kind of alarmed at the amount of students at UCLA that don't know what a federal resume is because no one ever told us. So it's just a heads up. Look into what those are. If you know someone who has a good one and they're willing to sit down with you and talk about it, hang on to that person and try to learn about it. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I've tried to kind of model mine after what I've seen from federal resumes, but I still see them be called CVs as well. But I'm a little more on the botany side of, and the GIS side and fire ecology side of like, if I do ever go for a federal position, I love academia. I probably will stay in academia as long as I can. But I'm always interested in that nexus between land management and academia. So I try to keep mine in a comfy position between a federal resume and like a CV. But I kind of see what you mean. It's just like they're bulky because they want to see those keywords in there. That's a big thing about federal resumes to keep in mind. You want to get those keywords in there for the robots.
okay, cool. Thank you both for those answers. I think another question that a lot of people were asking about is what they should include in the resumes, whether they can include things from their high school experiences and volunteering from then, whether they should include the paid positions in like unrelated fields. So what are your thoughts on what to include and how long to make it?
I think it so depends on what experiences you have. I think like just don't compare yourself. Like there was a student who came in, she just started and we interviewed her, so I saw her CV and I like immediately compared. I just never compare because I think it's really dependent on your experience. Like did you, when you came in as a freshman, know you loved research? So from the very beginning you've been getting all of these experiences, you might have more. For me personally, it took me until basically the summer before my senior year to realize I really loved research. And so I only had 1 year of research experience when I was like putting together this. And maybe I did 2 projects over that year, right? So I could kind of like spread it out. But I do think that, it depends. So I included in terms of like what unrelated stuff. So I was applying for field positions in Alaska doing like vegetation surveys and stuff like that. But before I decided to do science, I was a public health major and I did research with like forest dwelling tribal women in southern India. So I had like this whole like public health, like medicine, like access to healthcare stuff, but it was somewhat research related, right? Like there were some parallels. Was it the same topic? No, but the skills that you gain from that, I think is if the skills are transferable to whatever thing you're questioning, to what you're applying to, then you should add that onto that list. But did I tell them that I mean, and I don't know, maybe you should tell them that you nannied. Like I was a nanny for a family for like 6 years of 2 girls. Like I feel like that's an accomplishment, but I didn't put that on there. But I don't know if you were applying for something where you're managing people a lot, like maybe you do put that on there. I think it depends on what you have. So if you don't have that much experience, I would say if there's something in high school, like don't add things just to add things. But if there is something in high school that did contribute and you did think you learned and grew from it and it would add to this, don't not put it, I think, just because it was in high school either. But I do think it totally, like if you can avoid it and you have enough from your undergrad and you were on it to begin with, then great, put that stuff on there. like, don't be too scared and like never put stuff from high school, but also don't just put it on there to like bulk it up. That's not the point either. But yeah, Richard, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to tie this with Nicole's question about like social media. So I do a lot of science communication on my Instagram. I'm trying to get there with Twitter, but I'm more so there with Instagram. And so I might include that. It's pretty Googleable, so I might even put that in my media section of like with like public outreach and stuff. I do have a YouTube, I do webinars with the Institute, so I put that kind of stuff. But for previous jobs in volunteering, it like I think you nailed it on the head. It just depends on what job you're applying for. So I was a dog groomer for 4 years before I entered academia. And I realized I just love learning about the dogs and hanging out with dogs, but I don't really like dealing with people, which got me into studying plants. But I wouldn't put that on a resume anymore, or that I went to dog grooming school or, dog CPR or anything like that. Like, I don't feel like those are like relevant to, plant ecology. So, but I do feel like my dendrochronology, like field work, even though I'm not currently a dendrochronologist, I know how to do it very well. I do put that on my resume, but most of the positions I apply for aren't dendrochronology, and very few people want me to core trees. Unfortunately, I wish more people wanted me to core trees, but yeah, I think it just depends. You gotta, and it's okay to ask your friends and your advisors and your references what their opinion is, and when you want to get edits and stuff on your CV and second opinions, ask that.
Cool. And then I think one last big question that was asked by some of the people before the workshop, they wanted to know like how to make their resumes stand out even if they didn't have a lot of previous experiences or internships. How would they go about doing that?
If they did or if they didn't?
If they did not have too many previous experiences.
I mean, I think like order matters. I mean, I think it depends. Clearly, I think when you're going federal, like you have to beat the robot. So that's number one. But I think, in other ways, like ordering things in a way that's like the most impactful, I think part of it is like, even if it is so long, like, are they going to be looking through all of that? So probably like, at some point, you might, even if someone has 4 pages, and you only have 1.5, they might really just be first glancing at those first 2 pages. And so like, it's really, I just think about putting the most important stuff first, and the things, and I think even if you have few of them, but they're like really in line with whatever you're applying for, or maybe they're not, but the way that you've described it and the skills that you've described that you've gained from that job align perfectly to whatever job that you're doing, right? Even if it wasn't exactly the same. I think that's really one way to stick out, is like just having the most impactful things that you're proud of the most, that align to the job that you're applying to, up first. Then I would go and I would say low key, like, at least when I've looked through them for like undergrads coming to do research with me, I do a program with community college students, and we look through a bunch of CVs and resumes. Like, aesthetics does matter to some extent. Like, I do think that even if it's big in a bunch, like yours was really nice because you had things separated and your text was like indented. Like, it wasn't just like a page of block, right? Like it's busy, but I understand that it's formatted. So I think that, think about the formatting. Don't do a silly spelling mistake. Like, I think having it be very clean is a very nice thing, even if it isn't bulky, or like not bulky, but like full of things. Like, you don't have a lot of experiences. I think having it be clean and presentable and impactful first is the way to go. And in the end, like, maybe you don't get it because you don't have enough experience, and that's okay. Like, we get rejected all the time. I think I didn't get like the first 10 jobs I applied to out of undergrad, and then I finally got one, and then I was like, screw the job market, I'm going to grad school. But like, it happens, and sometimes you realize when creating a CV, like like maybe this isn't exactly the best fit. And maybe that's something to also consider when you're doing that. If you feel like there's nothing that fits, like maybe that's just a little thing to think about as well. Not to say that you shouldn't try. What's the worst they're going to do? Say no. Don't also spend too much time though and energy on doing something that has little reward probability.
I'm gonna answer Nicole's question to answer this. So let's say you don't have that much to put on your CV. First, your coursework, as long as it's relevant, I think is good to put on your CV. I actually keep forgetting to put mine on my CV. For example, a lot of the botany positions I kind of stock sometimes. They require 24 units of botany, like coursework. They include mycology under that because a lot of universities don't really have a mycology program, which is a joke because fungi are nothing like plants. But, or like kelp, like if you study kelp, like they'll include that. It's weird because it's not even a plant. But if I can get those 24 botany units, like that'll help for federal jobs. But it also helps for labs, right? If I'm interviewing for a PhD program, which I'm going to be soon, if I'm trying to get into doing remote sensing, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing with some ground truthing and vegetation stuff, they're going to want to know that I've taken the classes to get me to the point to launch me into research right away. They don't want to be like, oh, you have to learn how to use this program. Like, they're just going to choose the person that already has taken that class. So that might be a good filler for your CV. And it might just be good information to put on your CV. The other thing, if you're really lacking in things to put on your CV, today's the day to go do something. Like, today is the day to take care of yourself, make sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep and food and water and a shelter and healthcare, right? Or fight for it. But today's also the day to go email a grad student and ask them to do data entry for them. Today's the day to go find a restoration project and go dig a hole for an oak tree. Like, today is the day to go volunteer at an animal shelter. Like, just go do something. Like, so now you can put it on your CV. Start your own project, a community science project where you monitor the LA River looking for invasive plants. And then you write a blog about it. Bam, you've just now created your own project that you can add to your CV as relevant research experience. And you could even do like some really simple statistical tests on your little LA River weed project. You've just created something to put on your CV. So be creative, right? If you're just beginning, today's the day to kind of like talk to some grad students, talk to your mentors, figure out a game plan.
Grad students and professors always need help, even if it's only online. Like I couldn't agree more. Today is the day. Go and do it. We're online. So many opportunities now online, accessible to people who never had access to them. Like, I was a part of a workshop that people from internationally could be a part of because it was usually in person, and now it's online, so anybody could make it. I mean, other than like time zones. But I think that there's so many opportunities. I think especially at UCLA and certain undergrad institutions, you have these big, awesome groups and clubs and all these cool things that you can do and organizations you can be a part of and like workshops and presentations that if you do like a 2-day workshop or 1-day workshop, put that thing on there. I think today is well said, Richard. What a great way to say that. Today is the day.
Great. I think that's it for the questions that were submitted before the workshop. Does anyone have any questions for our two lovely speakers right now?
Yeah, I was wondering if the robots and HR stuff also apply to say like nonprofit work or academia. I was like assuming not, but just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so I'll at least answer this for nonprofits. Typically not. They're usually like for profits. They do have an HR department, so you will have to get over one person or a department before it gets to a biologist. Not all the time. Like sometimes the biologist is the one looking at your applications. I can tell you for the National Park Service, it's going to Mark Mendelson, who's looking at botanists and field technicians. And then he's going to send it to the HR at the nonprofit. So sometimes for federal jobs that hire through nonprofits, it's the national park that gets to hire you. It's not a robot. And then they send that paperwork over to the HR of the nonprofit. It's a little confusing. And then the nonprofit will hire you because the national park told them to hire you. But if you're applying for a federal position, then yeah, you got to have that language in your CV in order for the algorithm to pick it up so it can be sent to HR. Probably the same with California state parks and California government jobs as well. Don't let it scare you. It just means you got to rework your CV, which I think is the scariest thing. Like, oh my God, I'm already like afraid I'm applying for this job. Now I have to like modify this giant document, but you're just making it more relevant and more like you're making yourself look better for that very specific job. So I wouldn't be too afraid of it.
Right. I was kind of asking because I'm not really eligible for a federal job. So if I don't apply to those, would I like still have to worry about robots, to put it in a weird way?
I wouldn't say so. I can't for sure say no or yes, but my gut feeling is no. Yeah, my gut feelings, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But still, you absolutely have to modify your document no matter what. You're gonna have to create a Word document using the job description, and you're going to have to reconfigure things because HR or even the biologist is gonna be like, okay, this person hasn't said bird banding once, and I'm specifically looking for a field tech that knows bird banding. Like, why are they applying for this job? They've never captured a bird in their life, but you have captured birds, but you didn't know that's the way you're supposed to word it. Like, so you're still gonna have to change even with humans.
Cool. Any other questions? If not, we're going to move into a little breakout room session where you will have the chance to have one of the speakers have a little one-on-one session about reviewing your individual CVs. I'll just open up the breakout rooms now unless anyone has any last minute questions.
Hi, I was wondering if the slides will also be shared with us.
Yeah, we'll share the slides. When they email it to me, I'll put it on the website and you'll have access to that.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
I had a question. I'm looking at a master's program and they the tab says CVs, but they also accept resumes. I actually didn't know what a CV was until today. I thought it stood for cover letter. My bad. But I'm wondering because I don't really have the research experience or publications, if it's better for me to just submit a resume or if I should try to mess around and make a CV. I don't know if there's an advantage to having a CV over a resume when I feel like a CV more clearly shows the gaps in my background.
I guess it would totally depend. Okay, well, I would say what's the program? Is it a research program?
No, it's climate and society, so sort of working between social sciences and
so then
climate.
Okay, so I guess I wouldn't worry too much about then not having the research experience. I think I mean, I don't know, things are competitive, so maybe a lot of undergrads now have a bunch of research experience before masters, but I didn't have that much. I had one thing to put on there. And if you don't have something to put on, and I still made a CV, I had work experience and I had my outreach and I just filled it with things that you probably have on your resume. You just reconfigure it onto a CV. I mean, if you have workshops, I feel if you have anything that's somewhat related to that, I could feel it would also depend on what you would have to put on there. If we could group it into those things at all or figure out a way to kind of work it. I wouldn't be, I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Richard? I don't know if I would, I feel like I always want to see a CV, but maybe that's just me. But that's what I'm like familiar with. So I feel like if I saw something that was a little bit different, I might be kind of like, ooh, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think CV is a really safe way to go. One, you're in the position you're supposed to be in right now, experience wise. You matter, you belong there. I can't say this enough, you matter, right? The experience you have is the experience you have, own it. So if you come into that situation and like you have the expertise you do, that's totally fine. So in ecology, and this might be your experience as well. I don't apply for labs unless I've interviewed with the professor already, and like talked with them. It it's okay to cold email labs and like try to get those interviews and like talking about applying. Like I have a few friends that reach out to graduate coordinators and they're like, which lab do you think I'd be the best fit for? But then before they apply for that grad program, they then email that professor, coordinate with them, see if they have funding, see how funding would work out. And then they would apply for the grad school. Like, but I don't know how your program would work. Yeah, because it's like kind of like the social sciences as well. But with grad school, I definitely make sure I'm in with the lab first before I'm even in the school. Because I feel like getting into the school is the kind of the easy part. But like having the professor even accept you is the hard part. Do you agree with that? I don't know if you agree with that.
I think you're
muted.
Sorry, I totally agree for research programs, but I think that from what I understood, you were applying to like a program, which means that like it's like a law school. So you're literally just applying to like be put into the program. You're not, are you working specifically with an individual, Emily? Or is it just like, like, you know, 2 years of nursing school or like 2 years of business school? Like you're getting your, what's the thing? Your business, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's an MA, so I don't think it's very like there will be research opportunities, but in the application it just asks like, have you talked to a faculty member about this? And I just like clicked no. The thing too is it's due in 2 weeks. So I saw that today because I've been like working on my resume feeling good and I saw CV and I was like, like so I do like better understand how to like word things and advertise myself, but it's just a new format and like figuring all of that out.
Yeah. I guess I would, even if it's 2 weeks out, I would actually echo Richard and email someone on that list. And even just so that someone in that department, even if it's briefly, they hear your name and they can say something. If it's just, oh, I got an email, you know, just something so that someone in the department has some recollection of your name. If there's talking and going through these applications, I think if it's a few, I emailed multiple people in the department when I was looking for my PhD program, if there were a few people that I was really interested in working with. And a lot of it depends on if they had space for us, because the way that, you know, research positions are, you need funding. And so it's much more, like Richard was saying, dependent on that one person allowing you in there. If they have funding, then the department lets you in, no problem. But it sounds like it might be the other way for you. But I do still think that if they asked you a question of faculty, even if it's 2 weeks out and you feel like it's a little late, just, you know, tomorrow morning, write one and send it out. And I would to maybe one or two, just so, you know, I've seen some of your work. I think it's really interesting. You know, maybe we have this in common in terms of interests. I would love to, you know, maybe set up a time to talk more. I'm submitting an application. Done. And I think doing that once or twice, even if it's late, honestly, I feel like just I would have that on your checklist of things to do.
Thank you.
I do just want to echo that one of the last things you said about making sure that you tell the professor that you've gone through some of their research. Like that is like cold email 101. Definitely tell them I've looked through your research. Like this is like the interest, like I'm particularly interested in, you know, your work with grasslands and agriculture. Like this is something that I've kind of wanted to take into a different direction. I don't know if you're still doing this research, but like people love to be flattered about their own their own work. So if you do end up cold emailing a few people on that list, and so you can move that no to a yes for faculty, make sure you've just like gone in their lab page, look at their publications, do a Google search, news articles, look for news articles. They're really easily digestible.
TED
And
Talks, like, do they
TED
do
Talks,
some sort of
yes.
like I totally agree. Like, yes. And use the language, just like Richard said, rewrite the resume and the cover letter based on the language from the federal application. Like, go and see what are they doing. Like, I applied to a few labs that did like sexual selection, so like mate choice. I made it sure to use those words in my email so that they knew that like we're on the same page, you know. And I think, and yeah, academics love to get their egos stroked. So anything about I love your research, perfect.
I have a word of warning about that though. This didn't happen to me. This happened to one of my peers when I was a project consultant at Grand Challenges. They were researching, I mean, I guess what they were researching wasn't important, but they wanted to connect with a client about like, just for like advice, because the person they were trying to talk to was a prominent member of that field. So then they read articles about him and they referenced an article that he was in, like I guess he was interviewed. And apparently, like, I don't know how any of us could have known this, but he hated how he was portrayed in that article. So when they emailed him about it, and like they didn't even say anything bad, they just referenced the article, he was pissed at them. He like threatened to sever the work, like the professional relationship that they already kind of tentatively had. I don't know. That's probably like a crazy story that I hope doesn't happen often, but
no, Ray, that's a great story. And it's happened twice in my career already. So once I had an article written about me, which I put in my CV. And I had a professor that was misquoted in the article. He emailed me very aggressively, Richard, this article is going to ruin my life. Get my name out of it. And I didn't write the article, some journalist did. And I had nothing to do with him getting misquoted. And so I did end up working with the editor and getting a bunch of changes in the article. But like, if anyone were to backtrack that to him, he'd be very mad about it. And then my advisor, who's a grassland ecologist specialist, Dr. Polly Schiffman, if you talk to her about her work in the Carrizo Plain, which is some of her most cited research, she'll probably get pretty mad at you. It's just because she had a really bad relationship with the Bureau of Land Management and their like, and their fire department and their like, their restoration ecologist, because some of her findings were counterintuitive to what the narrative that the restoration ecologist wanted. It's just a bad way to do science. Like, let the data speak for itself. But if you mention that and you're like, oh, I love your research with the California grasslands, she is a grassland expert, but if you mention Carrizo Plain specifically, she'd be like, I gave up on that area, blah, blah, blah. And you'll get like an earful. So use recent research. People like to talk about their recent research. Do not talk about stuff from the 90s. You're going to get an earful. And there's probably a reason why they've evolved as a professor anyways. So.
I totally agree. I also think though, like, they're obviously going to know that you don't know that. Like, it sounds like from Richard's, it's more of a like, you know, okay, well, now that you brought that up, we don't talk about that anymore. Like, that's, you know, that's the thing. I would say though, if you found what Ray found and the person like legit gets mad at you, maybe that's a telltale sign that you don't want to work with them. Because like, how are you supposed to know that? And so I think that a lot of times, like reading, especially Emily, if you're applying to masters, like who you end up engaging with is gonna really dictate how happy you are. And so like little things like that, just keep an eye out. Yeah.
You are interviewing them. Like, don't forget that too. Like, yes, like they're interviewing you, but if they're throwing out red flags, they're misogynist, like they've made microaggressions towards like like they show they're kind of racist, like you get out of there, like interview over, like totally. Like another thing, you want them, I say this to people too, you want them to be excited about you coming into the lab. Like you want the interview to be enthusiastic. If you're sitting there groveling to get into their lab and they're kind of like tepid on you, like that's kind of a red flag. That's kind of like, I don't know. And that's just me personally. That's not someone I really want to work with. I want someone that's enthusiastic about the subject, that is enthusiastic about what I can contribute to the lab. If they're kind of like, if they're throwing red flags, then you're probably best interviewing with someone else too. So you matter, you have value, your experience is better. So yeah.
I think we reached the end of our time, and it looks like there's only like 5 of us left anyway. But if any of us like wants to reach out to you all, I'll give you their contact information, and they can set up a meeting to individually go over their CVs. But we really appreciate both of you coming in here today. Thank you so much. This is a great learning experience for, I'm pretty sure, everyone here. I learned a lot about how you're supposed to use specific keywords for certain things. And yeah, any last final words of advice?
Yeah, well, the CVs, you want us to send PDFs of the CVs?
Only if you want to. You
I'm
offered
okay.
your like lecture slides earlier with the emails, and that was what I was referring to earlier.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I know
okay sending that, but if someone wants to individually ask me for my CV, I'm okay sending that. Just because
okay.
I
Yeah,
haven't redacted my information. Maybe I could edit a version where I redact some information, but even then I probably prefer not. If someone wants to
Just-
email at me
yeah.
and ask me for my CV, they have my email and can do that. But
You can send me whatever you feel comfortable with.
I just replied with my slides, and they should be in the share settings that anyone with the link can view them.
All right, great.
And also, if anybody, yeah, give my email. If you all, if Emily, you're working on that CV, if you want to send it and, you're planning to want to try to work it into a CV from a resume, I'm more than happy to look at it. I'll give you some